What if everything you've been taught about prayer is actually keeping you from receiving what you're desperately asking for? Think about it for a moment. How many times have you knelt down, closed your eyes, and begged God for something you needed? How many prayers have you sent up into the heavens asking for healing, for financial breakthrough, for restored relationships, for peace? And how many times have those prayers felt like they disappeared into a void, unanswered, leaving you wondering if God was even listening? Has this ever happened to you? You're not alone. Millions of people around the world are trapped in this exhausting cycle, and what I'm about to share with you might completely transform the way you understand spiritual power. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world, and if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Now here's something that Smith Wigglesworth discovered after decades of spiritual practice, and it's going to challenge everything you think you know about prayer. Every single time you ask God for something, you're actually pushing it further away from you. I know that sounds completely backwards, doesn't it? After all, doesn't the Bible itself say, "Ask and you shall receive"? But stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might surprise you in ways you never imagined. When you pray for healing, think about what you're really declaring to the universe. You're affirming, with every word, that you are sick. When you beg for abundance, you're essentially shouting to the heavens that you are poor, that you lack, that you are separate from prosperity. This is the hidden trap that keeps millions of sincere, faithful people stuck in the same patterns year after year, praying harder, asking louder, yet experiencing the same disappointing results. Smith Wigglesworth spent his entire life teaching a revolutionary principle that turns conventional prayer on its head. He discovered that God isn't withholding anything from you. The universe isn't playing favorites. Divine abundance isn't rationed out to the lucky few who pray the right words at the right time. Here's the truth that most people never grasp. Infinite supply is already flowing toward you right now, in this very moment. The problem has never been God's unwillingness to give. The problem is your inability to receive what's already being offered. This isn't about positive thinking or visualization techniques. This is about a fundamental shift in consciousness that transforms you from a beggar at heaven's gate into a child who understands their inheritance. What you're about to learn goes beyond religion, beyond denomination, beyond any spiritual tradition you might follow. This is about understanding the actual mechanics of how divine abundance flows into human experience and why asking blocks it while receiving opens the floodgates. So what happens when you stop asking and start receiving? What changes in your consciousness, in your energy, in your very relationship with the divine source? The secret that Smith Wigglesworth taught sounds almost too simple when you first hear it, and that's exactly why most people miss it completely. He said, stop asking and start acknowledging what already is. That's it. That's the hidden truth that changes everything. But don't let the simplicity fool you, because this single shift in mindset creates a transformation so profound that it rewrites your entire spiritual journey. Here's what most people don't understand. Right now, in this very moment, in the silence of your being, God's infinite supply is already flowing. Healing isn't something you need to beg for because it's already present in your spiritual DNA. Abundance isn't locked away in some heavenly vault waiting for the right prayer to unlock it because it's already yours. Peace isn't a distant destination you have to travel toward because it's already established in the core of who you are. Your job, your only real task, isn't to create these things through desperate prayer or convince God to release them. Your job is simply to open yourself to receive what's already been given. Think of it this way, and this analogy completely shifted my own understanding of spiritual power. Imagine a radio station that's broadcasting beautiful music 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The music is always playing, always transmitting, always available. Now, when you walk into a room and turn on your radio receiver, does the music suddenly start playing just for you? Of course not. The music was already there. You didn't create it by turning on the radio. You didn't convince the station to start broadcasting. You simply tuned in to what was already happening. You aligned your receiver with the frequency that was already transmitting. If this teaching resonated with you, I'd love for you to subscribe to this channel. We dive deep into these kinds of transformative spiritual principles, exploring the hidden truths that shift consciousness and change lives. This is where we go beneath the surface together. This is the consciousness shift that Smith called practicing the presence, and it reveals the impact of your current approach to prayer. When you're constantly asking God for things, you're like someone standing in front of a radio, begging it to play music, completely unaware that you just need to turn it on and tune it to the right frequency. Your asking, your pleading, your desperate prayers are actually the static that blocks you from hearing the divine broadcast that never stops flowing. When you stop asking God for things and start receiving what's already being transmitted, something miraculous occurs. You begin to feel the divine flow that was there all along but was blocked by your own resistance. And here's the revelation that most people never grasp. Your asking was the resistance. Every prayer request was like turning up the static, making it harder to hear the music that was already playing. The moment you shift from asking to receiving, it's like suddenly the static clears, and you hear the symphony that's been playing for you since before you were born. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because understanding the mechanics of why asking blocks and receiving opens is crucial to your transformation. There's an energy shift that happens in your entire being when you move from the consciousness of lack to the consciousness of abundance. And once you understand this shift, you'll never approach prayer the same way again. Write in the comments, "I'm ready to receive," if this resonates with you. Your entire energy changes the moment you shift from asking to receiving. And this isn't just some abstract spiritual concept. This is something you can actually feel in your body and your emotions, in the very atmosphere around you. When you're in asking mode, there's a vibration that radiates from you, and that vibration is unmistakable. It's the energy of lack, of desperation, of feeling separated from what you need. Every prayer that begins with "Please God, give me," is essentially broadcasting to the universe, "I don't have this, and I desperately need you to give it to me." Can you feel the heaviness in that? The tension? The underlying fear that maybe you won't get it? But the moment you shift into receiving consciousness, everything transforms. The vibration completely changes. Instead of lack, there's fullness. Instead of desperation, there's gratitude. Instead of feeling separated from your good, you feel united with the source of all good. Receiving carries an entirely different frequency because it recognizes something profound. God's infinite nature is your nature. What God has, you have. Not because you're special or chosen, but because you're an expression of the divine itself. This is the hidden truth behind every spiritual teaching, though it's often obscured by religious language that keeps people feeling small and unworthy. Smith Wigglesworth taught that Christ consciousness isn't about worshiping someone outside of yourself. It's about recognizing your oneness with the divine source. Think about the impact of this revelation on your entire approach to spirituality. When you receive instead of ask, you're no longer a beggar standing at heaven's gate, hoping someone will throw you scraps of blessing. You're a child who's finally walked into your Father's house and realized that everything here already belongs to you. You're not asking permission to access your inheritance. You're simply opening your eyes to see what's always been yours. This is where the real transformation happens, and I need to be completely honest with you about this journey. This shift in consciousness from poverty thinking to abundance thinking doesn't happen overnight. You're rewiring patterns that have been deeply embedded in your mind for decades. Every religious message you've ever heard that made you feel small, unworthy, or separated from God created a groove in your consciousness. Every prayer where you begged and pleaded reinforced the mindset that you're lacking and God is withholding. Those patterns don't dissolve instantly just because you understand a new concept, intellectually. But here's what Smith discovered through his own experience and through teaching thousands of people. Every single moment you spend in receptive awareness builds your new spiritual foundation. It's like constructing a house. The first day you lay one brick and it doesn't look like much. The second day, another brick. But you keep showing up. You keep practicing this receptive consciousness. And slowly something solid begins to form. You're not trying to achieve some distant spiritual state. You're simply opening to what's already present, and each time you do this, the opening gets wider, the flow gets stronger, the awareness gets clearer. If you found value in what we explored today, go ahead and hit that like button. It helps this message reach more people who are tired of asking and ready to start receiving. The decisions you make in these moments of practice determine whether you stay trapped in the old pattern of asking or step into the freedom of receiving. And what most people don't realize is that this isn't just about getting your prayers answered. This is about discovering who you really are behind all the religious conditioning, all the shame, all the unworthiness that's been layered onto your consciousness. When you practice receiving, you're peeling back those layers and meeting your true self, the part of you that has never been separated from God, not even for a second. Put down in the comments, "I choose abundance," if you're ready to. Leave poverty consciousness behind. The practice itself is beautifully simple, though I want to be upfront with you about something. Simplicity doesn't mean it's easy, and mastery absolutely requires patience. But that's actually part of what makes this so powerful. You don't need special training. You don't need to understand complex theology. You don't need years of meditation experience. You just need to be willing to sit quietly for a few minutes each day and shift your approach. Instead of coming before God with your shopping list of needs, presenting every problem and lack like you're placing an order at a cosmic restaurant, you simply say inwardly, "I am now open to receive all that God is giving me." That's it. No elaborate prayers, no religious formulas, no begging or bargaining. Just that simple statement of receptivity. Then you feel yourself as an open channel, imagining divine substance flowing into every area of your life. Your health, your relationships, your finances, your purpose, your peace. You're not forcing anything to happen. You're not trying to visualize specific outcomes or manipulate reality. You're simply being receptive, like the earth receives rain, like your lungs receive air. Practice this receptive awareness for just 10 minutes daily. Some days you'll feel absolutely nothing and wonder if you're wasting your time. Other days you'll sense something profound, a peace that doesn't make logical sense, or a sudden knowing that settles in your chest. The key is not to judge your progress based on what you feel or don't feel in those 10 minutes. You're reconditioning decades of poverty consciousness, and that kind of transformation happens beneath the surface before you see any external evidence. Let me share a real story that illustrates the impact of this shift. There was a woman named Maria who had been praying desperately for financial breakthrough for 3 solid years. Every single month, same desperate prayers, same mounting debt, same crushing anxiety. Her asking had become so intense, so violent in its desperation, that she would literally shake her fists at heaven, demanding that God answer her. But her situation just kept getting worse, creating this vicious cycle where the more she asked, the more hopeless things became. Then Maria stumbled across Smith Wigglesworth's teaching on receptivity, and honestly, her first reaction was resistance. She thought, if I stop asking, God will completely forget about me. At least when I'm praying desperately, I'm doing something. But she'd reached a point where desperation made her willing to try anything, even something that felt completely backwards to everything she'd been taught. For 30 days, Maria committed to practicing simply receiving instead of asking. She sat quietly morning and evening, opening her consciousness to divine supply without demanding anything specific. The first 2 weeks felt absolutely empty, almost scary. Nothing seemed to be happening externally, and internally it felt like she was just sitting there doing nothing. But beneath the surface, beneath what she could consciously perceive, something fundamental was shifting. That knot of anxiety that had lived in her chest for 3 years began to loosen. A strange peace started replacing the panic she'd carried for so long. By week 3 of this journey, unexpected opportunities started appearing. A freelance project out of nowhere, a debt suddenly forgiven, a forgotten refund check arriving in the mail. 6 months later, Maria's entire financial situation had completely transformed. But here's what she told me was even more important than the money. Her relationship with God had fundamentally changed. She no longer approached the divine as a beggar hoping for scraps. She'd become a beloved child receiving her inheritance. And that shift in consciousness changed everything about how she experienced life. Write in the comments, receiving, not asking, if Maria's story speaks to something you've experienced in your own journey. David's story takes this revelation into an even more powerful territory because his struggle was with his physical body. He'd been diagnosed with a chronic condition and spent 5 exhausting years in desperate healing prayers. He attended every prayer meeting he could find, anointed himself with oil, declared healing scriptures over his body, fasted, bargained with God. But his body remained sick, and honestly, his asking had become almost aggressive, tinged with anger at God for not responding to his faithful petitions. A friend handed him one of Smith Wigglesworth's writings on spiritual healing, and the concept absolutely startled him at first. What if healing wasn't something God needed to send down from heaven, but something already present in his true spiritual nature? What if his desperate asking was actually the obstacle preventing him from experiencing the wholeness that was already his? The idea felt dangerous, almost heretical, but David was desperate enough to explore it. He began practicing receptive awareness with a completely different approach. Instead of begging God to heal him, he would sit quietly and affirm, "I am open to receive the perfect health that is my divine inheritance." He stopped fighting his symptoms and started resting in the presence of God. This wasn't denial of his condition or some kind of toxic positivity. It was recognition of a deeper spiritual reality that existed beyond what his body was currently experiencing. Progress came gradually over many months, and I want to emphasize this because the journey wasn't dramatic or instantaneous. Some days were harder than others. Some weeks felt like nothing was changing. But slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, symptoms began shifting. More importantly, the fear that had gripped him for 5 years started releasing its hold. Within a year, medical tests confirmed what David already felt inside: significant improvement. His doctor, baffled by the change, called it spontaneous remission. David called it learning to receive what God had already given. Then there's Jennifer, whose story reveals how this principle works in the messiest, most complicated area of human experience: relationships. She'd prayed for years for her troubled marriage to heal, and her prayers were filled with requests for God to change her husband, to make him understand her, to fix their broken communication, to save their marriage. She was exhausting herself asking God to transform her circumstances and her partner, and the more she prayed, the worse things seemed to get. When she encountered Smith's teaching, her immediate reaction was fear. If I stop asking God to fix my marriage, it will definitely fall apart, she thought. But her current approach clearly wasn't working, so she decided to experiment with something radically different. Instead of asking God to change her husband, she practiced receiving divine love and peace into her own consciousness. Each morning she sat quietly and opened herself to receive God's love, not asking for anything external to change, but allowing her inner being to be filled with divine presence. The shift was subtle at first, almost invisible, but she noticed herself responding differently to her husband, less reactive, more peaceful, genuinely more loving, without having to force it or pretend. Over several months, something remarkable happened as Jennifer changed her consciousness from asking to receiving. Her husband began responding differently too. The relationship dynamic shifted in ways she never could have orchestrated through asking. They weren't suddenly perfect, but genuine healing occurred, and it came from a completely unexpected direction. Put down, inner shift creates outer change, if you're seeing how this works. What Smith Wigglesworth discovered through his own journey is that this shift from asking to receiving isn't just a one-time decision. It's a complete reorientation of how you move through your day, and he taught several complementary practices that deepen your ability to receive from God in ways that become almost automatic over time. One of the most transformative practices he called practicing the presence. And it's something you can do right now, wherever you are. Throughout your day, in the middle of ordinary moments, pause frequently and simply acknowledge God's presence. You don't need to stop what you're doing or close your eyes or say formal prayers. Just a brief internal recognition. God is here right now. Divine intelligence is operating in this situation. The infinite is expressing right where I am. These micro moments of awareness train your consciousness to remain in receptive mode, instead of constantly slipping back into asking mode as the day unfolds. Another practice that carries enormous impact is what he called gratitude recognition. But this isn't gratitude for what you want to receive in the future. This is gratitude for what's already being given that you haven't noticed. Thank you for the breath flowing into my lungs without my asking. Thank you for my heart beating without my requesting it. Thank you for the intelligence running my body's systems right now. This shifts you from future-focused asking to present-moment receiving, and you begin recognizing the millions of gifts already flowing to you every single second. Then there's inner listening, which is probably the most challenging practice for people who've spent years talking at God. Most prayer is essentially monologue, asking and requesting and petitioning and pleading. But true prayer, according to Smith's teaching, is listening to God, setting aside time daily for silent receptivity where you're not asking for anything, not even thinking spiritual thoughts, just listening with your inner being for that still, small voice. This listening isn't passive or lazy. It's alert, attentive, wide, open, like a musician listening for a distant melody. He also taught contemplative reading of spiritual truth, but not reading to gather information or check off your daily Bible reading. Reading to open yourself to revelation. You take a single spiritual idea and contemplate it slowly, letting it sink into your consciousness without analyzing it intellectually. And there's the practice of releasing treatment, where instead of asking God to fix your problems, you release situations to divine intelligence and open yourself to receive God's perfect solution. But here's where I need to be completely honest with you about the biggest obstacle you'll face when shifting from asking to receiving. Because if I don't prepare you for this, you might abandon the practice right before your breakthrough. The challenge is this: receiving feels like you're doing absolutely nothing. Asking feels active, powerful, like you're taking charge and making things happen. Your ego loves asking because it feels like you're in control. But receiving feels passive, lazy, like you've given up. Your ego will scream at you when you start practicing this. You have to ask. You have to pursue. You have to make things happen. You can't just sit there doing nothing. This is where most people abandon receiving and return to desperate asking, because they interpret the quiet peace of receiving as spiritual inactivity. But here's the hidden truth. Receiving is the most powerful spiritual action there is. It requires tremendous trust to stop asking and simply open yourself to what God is already giving. You're not being passive, you're being receptive, which is profoundly active in the spiritual dimension, even though it doesn't feel that way to your ego. Write in the comments, trust over effort, if you're willing to face this challenge. Another major challenge that stops people from experiencing the full transformation is the delay between shifting your consciousness and seeing actual results in your external world. You might practice receiving for days, even weeks, without any visible change in your circumstances. Your bank account still shows the same numbers, your body still has the same symptoms, your relationships still carry the same tension. The temptation becomes overwhelming to return to asking, bargaining, and pleading with God because at least that feels like you're doing something. Smith Wigglesworth warned specifically about this delay, and understanding it can save you from giving up right before your breakthrough. He taught that consciousness shift always precedes manifestation shift. Your inner transformation must stabilize before your outer world reflects it. Think of it like planting a seed. The moment you put that seed in the ground, nothing visible happens. Days pass, maybe weeks, and if you dig it up to check, you'll destroy the process. But beneath the surface, in the darkness where you can't see, roots are forming, life is organizing itself, preparation is happening. Then suddenly a green shoot breaks through the soil. This delay is actually a gift, though it doesn't feel like one when you're going through it. It tests whether you're truly receiving or just asking in a different way. Are you receiving because you trust the divine flow, or are you receiving because you want results? When you face this delay, and most people do, it reveals your true motivation. This is when you discover whether you're learning receptivity or just using a new technique to manipulate God into giving you what you want. Many people give up right at this point, right before their breakthrough. They practice receiving for 3 weeks, see no results, and return to desperate asking. Then they miss the manifestation that was about to appear because they didn't give their consciousness shift enough time to stabilize and reflect outward. The journey requires patience during this challenging phase, trusting that the inner shift is real even when circumstances haven't changed yet. Now, I want to go even deeper into what Smith called the most advanced form of this practice. something he taught to people who had already mastered basic receptivity. He called it impersonal meditation, and it addresses a subtle trap that catches even sincere spiritual seekers. What happens is people stop asking God for money or health or relationships, which is progress, but then they start asking for spiritual experiences. They want enlightenment, mystical, visions, spiritual powers, dramatic breakthroughs in consciousness. This is just asking in disguise, dressed up in more sophisticated spiritual language. True receiving, at its highest level, is completely impersonal. You're wanting nothing, including spiritual attainment. You practice receiving without any agenda whatsoever, not receiving to get healing, not receiving to manifest abundance, not even receiving to become more spiritual or enlightened. You're simply resting in receptive awareness, for its own sake, with no goal, no desire, no hidden motivation. This might feel empty or pointless at first. Your mind will panic and demand to know what the point is if you're not getting anything out of it. But that's precisely the point. You're learning to receive God's being rather than God's gifts. You're experiencing union rather than transaction. This shift transforms your entire relationship with the divine from "what can I get" to "what am I?" And that revelation changes everything about how you experience existence itself. Put down being, not getting, if this deeper level resonates with where you are on your path. The most advanced application of everything we've been exploring is what Smith Wigglesworth called living the illumined life. And this is when the practice stops being a practice and starts being who you are. Receiving becomes so natural, so integrated into your being, that you no longer distinguish between spiritual practice and daily living. Your entire existence becomes one continuous flow of receiving divine presence, guidance, and substance without effort or conscious thought. This doesn't mean challenges stop appearing in your life. Smith himself emphasized that even in this state, difficulties arise, circumstances shift, problems emerge. But the fundamental difference is that you meet them from receiving consciousness automatically. Your default setting has shifted from asking to receiving. When financial pressure appears, you don't have to remind yourself to receive. You're already open to divine supply. When health issues emerge, your consciousness is already receptive to spiritual wholeness without thinking about it. When relationship conflicts occur, you're already receiving divine love and wisdom as your natural state. Reaching this level takes years of dedicated practice for most people, and I want you to know that up front so you don't get discouraged. But here's what makes the journey worthwhile. Every single day of practicing receiving moves you closer to this illumined life. Every moment you choose receptivity over asking rewires your consciousness at a fundamental level. You're not trying to achieve some distant future state. You're opening to what's already present right now. And that's the beauty of this entire approach. The gift has already been given. You're simply learning to notice it, to receive it, to live from it, rather than constantly seeking it outside yourself. This transforms not just your spiritual life, but every dimension of your human experience. Your decisions become clearer because you're receiving guidance rather than anxiously analyzing options. Your relationships deepen because you're receiving love rather than demanding it from others. Your creative expression flourishes because you're receiving inspiration rather than striving to manufacture it. Now I want to share with you the ultimate truth that Smith Wigglesworth revealed, and this is the revelation that brings everything together. You are not separate from God trying to receive gifts from an external source somewhere out there in the universe. You are the very consciousness of God, receiving awareness of your own infinite nature. Let that sink in for a moment. When you practice receiving, you're not getting something new that you didn't have before. You're removing the veil that blocked your recognition of what has always been yours. The problem was never God's unwillingness to give. God has been pouring infinite abundance, unconditional love, perfect wisdom, and complete wholeness toward you since before you were born. The problem was your inability to receive because your consciousness was focused on lack rather than abundance, on separation rather than oneness, on begging rather than being. Every prayer where you asked was like putting up a wall between you and the flow that was already coming toward you. This is why asking never worked the way you hoped it would. You were essentially asking yourself to give yourself what you already had. You were demanding that God provide what God has never stopped providing. The entire asking paradigm was based on a false premise, that you're separate from the source and need to convince it to help you. But the truth, the hidden truth that transforms everything, is that you and the source are one. What God is, you are. What God has, you have. Not in some future heaven, but right now, in this moment, in your very being. Write in the comments, I am one with the source, if this truth is awakening something deep within you. If you're still here with me, if you've stayed through this entire journey from asking to receiving, I want you to know that's not a coincidence. Something in you recognized the truth in what we've explored together today. Maybe you've been exhausted from years of desperate asking and finally heard a different way forward. Maybe you've sensed all along that there was a deeper spiritual reality beneath the surface of conventional prayer. Whatever brought you here, you were meant to hear this message. This understanding of receiving versus asking isn't just another spiritual concept to add to your collection. This is a fundamental shift in consciousness that has the power to transform every area of your life. And if this resonated with you, if something awakened inside you as we went through Smith Wigglesworth's teaching, then I'd love for you to subscribe to this channel. We dive deep into these kinds of transformative spiritual principles regularly, exploring the hidden truths that most religious teachings miss or gloss over. This is where we go beneath the surface together. Leave a comment right now and just write, I'm receiving, not asking. Let me know this message landed with you, that you're ready to shift from the old paradigm of begging to the new consciousness of receiving. I read every single comment, and I want to know where you are on this journey. And if you found value in what we explored today, go ahead and hit that like button. It helps this message reach more people who are tired of asking and ready to start receiving. There are so many souls out there still trapped in poverty consciousness, still shaking their fists at heaven, still wondering why their prayers aren't being answered. Your like helps this teaching find them. Before you go, there's a video right here that takes this even deeper into practical application. It's about how to maintain receiving consciousness when life throws you challenges that trigger your old asking patterns. Click on it and continue with me over there. Let's keep exploring this transformation together. Remember, the divine flow is already pouring toward you. Your only job now is to receive it.